I promised in the class essentials that I wouldn't make a lot of videos since this is a writing and reading class, but I'll make one that's appropriate here because we're taking a look at some student papers that are models for the first paper assignment, the observation description assignment. Here's our assignment here. You recognize it right away. It's one that we're been working on in our second to last week for this assignment. This video contains some examples of student papers that have worked well and some that have worked less well. I've gotten permission to use these papers. And the only thing I'd say about taking a look at the video and sort of taking example from some of these students' papers is that you're not to actually copy them word for word, and that they are meant as educational purposes only. You never want to take a student paper and use it word for word for something that you want to turn in, not the least of which is because it's plagiarism, but also because it's not really doing the job of writing. But let's see if we can't discover some things from past student papers that will give you some insight as to what you might do to be successful for this paper. So, okay, some examples that we can take a look at today. Look at a couple to begin with. Here's a student paper that seems pretty ordinary on its surface. Yeah. But it's doing the job of the assignment, which is getting the spirit of the assignment right away. I'll have some students take a look at a paper like this and kind of laugh, but they really shouldn't, because it's doing something that's no less important than what Samuel Scudder's doing. Look at the topic here. Looking past the everyday, it's got a title here. Sometimes people forget altogether to put a title on, or they put a title, say, Observations, which I find pretty boring. Very vanilla title. When you think of it, the title is the first impression that you want to make for your paper, but I wouldn't labor over it so if it's the only thing that you're writing. And here's his beginning. He says, describing new places can be challenging and fun, but I wanted to go into this assignment with the approach of what have I been missing? Looking for the things that stick out from the ordinary, the things that are beyond the obvious that everybody sees. He says, I picked a very basic item to observe. It has been in front of me for over half my life, and I probably walked by it 1,000 times on the way to school and work. I have a great big tree in the front yard that resides about 15 feet outside my front double doors. I wanted to observe this because of the fact that it has been in front of my own two eyes for so long, and I wanted to know what I had been oblivious to this entire time. All right, the paper's about a tree. Now, I've skipped over a couple of errors that are in this first paragraph because there are a couple small errors that I would normally mark up and did for the student. But in this case, I want to focus on the subject. I'm going to take a look at a tree that he hasn't looked at before, and the things that he'll notice about the tree, not just the tree swing in it, and the fact that he used it as a job to climb on, but the fact that it's also this tree that he can study and examine the bark of, examine its injuries, examine how well it's growing. You don't have to be an arborist to notice things about a tree right in front of your house, or be interested in a tree, or to recite old poems about how trees are important and there's nothing like them. A tree is a good subject here because just as Samuel Scudder took a look at a fish and it was no big deal, here's a fish. And yet he was really observing his observations. So the discoveries that are going to be made in this paper are, yes, about the tree, but also about what you miss, what you don't notice. Right? It might be interesting if you were to look at the place, you kind of glide right by. That's the approach of the assignment, and it's no small thing, so please don't treat it as just something that's very ordinary indeed. Let me do one thing. You know, here's a paper that's a little assignment-y at the beginning, but it has some decent idea what to do, and let me show why. If you're going right from the beginning of the paper, he says, right after I was assigned this paper, I knew exactly where I wanted to go and observe and describe. I chose one of my favorite spots to go in Minnesota, a place where it's always calm and a great place to sit and think. It's also one of the spots that I take all my friends who come to the Twin Cities, so you can tell it means a lot to me. It's not a bad beginning, although I think the context that you need to give for the place where you're going to go can be shorter generally. You don't want to run the risk of sounding a little bit too assignment-y. Now, I'll show you an example of a paper that's really assignment-y later. It says, this paper is about, and that's, something you should weed out of the paper when you're ready to turn in the final draft. The place you go is not just to fulfill an assignment. Everybody can do that. I'm fulfilling an assignment, they'd say. You want to show the place where you're going has a purpose, and don't want that to interfere with the thesis that you're trying to present. Let's continue on with this paper. The place I chose is a small little stretch of the shore along the Mississippi River, and it's located right at the end of Summit Avenue and the east bank of the river. Now, there's no main idea yet presented, so that's a little fault of this paper. I think given us context, but no sense of purpose or what we're going to see when we get out there. And the hook could be a little bit stronger in this paper. It's not a perfect paper, but there are good things that will go on in it. Now let's take a look at what he says here. He has almost a second introduction with that second paragraph. Perhaps he could combine the two and actually make a stronger paper. After classes on Monday, I drove over there, excited to see what would stick out to me. So after arriving, I decided to move down close to the bank where I saw there was no one around. After finally getting set up, I tried to observe my surroundings, but suddenly gnats started coming from everywhere. It started to pester me as if they were starving and I was a steak dinner. Luckily, I swatted and fought them off, so I was now ready to start taking in my surroundings. Continuing on just a little bit. We got the gnats, the steak dinner. Now, the first thing that stuck out to me was that this was a usually quiet place, but from far away across the river, I started to hear the sound of the jackhammer and the long drawn-out sound of a construction vehicle backing up. Beep, beep, beep. And you might think this is kind of irrelevant or unimportant, but it's not bad, trying to get us there and to put the sound effects there. And I'll say that, and we'll have 20 people immediately trying to incorporate some kind of sound effects in the paper. It's only really appropriate if what you're doing really relates to the main point, and it will relate to this student's main point because he's going to write about the things that are going to interfere with the things that interfere with his observing his natural surroundings, which is what he went there to do in the first place. So that's why I kind of show this paper. While it gets off to a little bit of a rough start, the basic idea that this student has followed is not a bad one because he is trying to put us there and talk about the difficulties of putting himself there, because difficulty talking about where he's observing because of all of the things that are distracting and interfering with his observation assignment. And that'll be part of the focus of the paper, part of what he talks about in order to overcome the distractions. Just as Samuel Scudder had to refocus and get back to the thing he was studying, so too did this student. Let's continue on. Let's take a look at another paper here. I have a paper here that's a description paper, and it's about observing dogs when they get together. Again, you may laugh at this, but when you're observing the natural world or even the animal world, lots of different things can happen. I like this paper because this student, who really did love her animals, talked about and talked in detail about how the animals got together and how they interacted and what she looked for. I've had really decent papers about such subjects because you have to really attend and look closely. And those people who are animal lovers know that they do have to watch very carefully as to how they're reacting, what they need. Let's take a little look at her paper. Who loves dogs? I do. I own a pit bull and her name is Honey. Honey does everything with me. You could say that she's connected to my hip. This weekend, Honey and I went up north to visit my brother for Labor Day weekend. My brother owns a pit bull too. Her name is Charlie. Honey is 2 years old and Charlie is 6 months old. Whenever Honey and I go to visit my brother, Honey shows the need for control and power towards Charlie because Honey is older and wiser. Now here we do have a main thesis. Pretty good. The introduction itself talks about a couple of different things. There could be ways to make that more coherent, but she's headed somewhere. She's talking about how the dogs interact when they do get together. And that's not a bad thing. She's going to have to observe and actually describe the specifics of that. She's going to have to talk about even how they react to each other, not just by biting, but also by how they play and don't play very well when they're meeting each other. And I think that is right at the heart of the assignment. You're noticing these small details, things that people might otherwise just totally neglect.